about opening that door on how this may not have been intentional. Now, Jennifer, you just heard General Deptula say, well, it wasn't like somebody set their coffee cup down and it was that kind of a...
The thread on the fabric. So I'm just going to lay the thread out there. Yeah, we'll take another one, and maybe that cream. That would be great.
The rest is history. Trump has told the Iranians, you cannot disrupt navigation of the seas, you can't attack our interests, our allies. That's an unacceptable way to
And
live
what's
in the 21st
interesting
century.
right there,
They
he's
are
drawing a
testing-
similarity to this being a seminal moment for
They fomented human atrocities, repeatedly lied to the United States, proved to be reckless, regional pariah. It is concerning and irresponsible for the United States to continue providing them arms. That's from your closest ally. Today, the UK, in a landmark court ruling, has seen arms sales suspended because of Yemen and violations of the laws of war.
I think that Ron Paul's statement is not accurate. I think he's misinformed. We entered Yemen in order to support the legitimate government. The war in Yemen started 9 months before the coalition intervened, and the coalition intervened at the request of the legitimate government in order to prevent Iran and its allies from taking
We're
over
going to talk about
strategic
Iran in a
important
second,
country.
but there's a big argument
That's
in the
one.
United States.
The other argument with regards to the 22 resolutions of disapproval for weapons sale is a political issue domestic to the US. There are other countries
And to
on
the
that.
UK.
There are other countries on that list that they want to stop weapons to, including, if you read the resolutions, UK, France, Italy, Spain, India, South Korea, Israel, Jordan, Qatar, Bahrain. It doesn't make sense to have these resolutions. We are fighting a legitimate war. The US is projecting power into the region in order to deter Iranian aggression. Does Senator Rand Paul want to send more American
It's not
troops
just
to the
Senator
region?
Rand Paul, there's a lot of people in the Senate.
Those who call for a suspension of weapons sales to the coalition are pleasing the Death to America crowd.
Do you think the president or Congress will win this battle on arms?
I believe that the logic is very compelling for supporting Saudi Arabia and the coalition. I believe that the alliance between Saudi Arabia and the United States has existed for 80 years, has been critically important to the two countries and to stability in the region and in the world. And I believe that wisdom will prevail and these issues will proceed.
Interestingly, the former Defense Secretary Ash Carter told me that actually Saudi Arabia had not been a massively reliable military ally and there needed to be a reset. We need, he said to me, to demand more of Saudi Arabia. We'll leave that for the moment. Iran, which you are incredibly concerned with, and I know you have a particularly personal consideration, given that there was a plot exposed
Nothing
to
personal.
assassinate you. The President of the United States has now said that these attacks on shipping have had a, quote, very minor impact. Where is this headed, do you think? Saudi Arabia says it doesn't want war. The President of the United States says he doesn't want war. We're not sure what his national security staff particularly want or what the plan is. Where is this headed?
It's really up to the Iranians. We have made it very clear that nobody wants war. We don't want war. The US doesn't want war. We have also made it very clear that Iran's aggressive behavior must stop. Its undermining of freedom of navigation in the Gulf is not acceptable. Its providing of ballistic missiles to terrorist groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis is not acceptable. Its support for terrorism is not acceptable. And its interference in the affairs of other countries in the region is not acceptable. So if Iran wants to be treated as a normal country, it has to comport itself as such.
Adel Al-Jubair, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, just after that interview, the US Senate backed a resolution to block weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. President Trump has threatened to veto that. Now, back to the topic of our conversation, which is Iran. Tensions are rising as President Trump vows that Iran will soon find out whether the US will retaliate for a downed American drone. The confrontation puts America's European allies in a bind. They, along with China and Russia, are still committed to the nuclear deal that aims to prevent Iran developing nuclear weapons. So joining us now with his take is Gérard Araud. He is the former French ambassador to the United States and to the United Nations, and he's joining us from New York. Ambassador, welcome back to the program.
Hello, hi.
Let me get your sort of measure of what's happening. You can see this escalation in the Persian Gulf with now the drone. Well, how do you read the words coming out of the US today on this?
No, I think President Trump has always been very consistent. He doesn't want war, but he considers that a policy of maximum pressure will bring the Iranians to a negotiation. I think he is not wrong. You know, a negotiation is based on the balance of power. The Americans always have the upper hand. They are exerting a very strong pressure, so he could hope that at some moment the Iranians could come to a negotiation. But it will work only if we have diplomacy, if we have a diplomatic path. And that's what is tragically missing right now.
Well, as you say, let me just repeat for you, the Middle East expert Vali Nasser has written in the New York Times, President Trump may not want war, but he will get one unless he balances coercion with diplomacy. Tehran has met maximum pressure with maximum resistance. The only option left is to talk. I mean, it's kind of what you've just said, but how? How does one get a path to talk through this war of words and indeed this attack on shipping, the downing of the drone, which, as you know, Iran says was in its own airspace, over its waters?
No, I think you're perfectly right. We are in a very dangerous moment. We are really at the mercy of any incident. And we know that on both sides, you have radicals who actually are looking for a war. So again, how can we create a diplomatic dialogue between the Americans and the Iranians, which would mean on the American side that, in a sense, they tell precisely what they want. Because on the American side, we have 12 maximum demands. It's obvious that the Iranians are not going to accept these 12 overnight. So what is the sequence of these demands? And what the Americans are ready to give to the Iranians, because in any negotiation, you have to give something. And again, for the moment, nobody on the American side has been able to express it.
Yes, I mean, it does seem, not only have they not expressed it, but we seem to be very far away from that, given, as I was saying, this sort of military back and forth that's going on in the Gulf. Let me just read what the Iranian foreign minister has said today. Javad Zarif has tweeted that the U.S. wages economic terrorism on Iran, has conducted covert action against us, and now encroaches on our territory. We don't seek war, but will zealously defend our skies, land, and waters. We'll take this new aggression to the UN and show that the US is lying about international waters. So again, the verbal stakes are being raised. And I guess I want to ask you, from a European perspective, where do you see the beginning of this escalation? And I ask because the chief advisor to the European Union foreign policy leader, Federica Mogherini, her advisor said that this vicious cycle, she says, was started by the United States. And Europe will not follow the United States into any kind of military aggression. And she says it was started by the US violating the terms of the nuclear agreement by not just pulling out, but sanctioning Iran.
Well, I don't think it's very useful, to look for responsibility, because, you can say that everything started with the invasion of Iraq by the US, which really gave to Iran such big opportunities to move forward in the Middle East. But you have also the general behavior of Iran, which has been quite destructive in terms of terrorism, its action in Syria. So again, what we have today is maximum tension. We need some de-escalation so that there is not one incident leading to a confrontation that even the president doesn't want, but it can happen by a sort of accident. The French National Security Advisor was in Tehran yesterday, and Europeans, we have always said to the Americans and to the Iranians that we are ready to be the go-between between both sides. I don't know if the Americans are ready to go down this way, because it would mean not only saying, okay, we accept you as a go-between, but it would mean also on the American side and on the Iranian side, a real de-escalation measures.
Mm-hmm. Yes, interesting. You say that President Macron did, in fact, send his advisor to Iran. And before that, the Japanese sent, I think, Japanese Prime Minister went, and we also had the German Foreign Minister went as well in the last few weeks since all of this escalation. Could you see a roadmap to de-escalation? I know you say it depends on the U.S. agreeing to have a sort of a third party or a go-between. Can you see a roadmap to a de-escalation?
Well, in the quotation you gave about this a European personality, there is a point which is right, is that the Americans are waging an economic war against Iran. Really, because the sanctions imposed by the United States are extremely punishing, and punishing also at the expense of the civilian population. So maybe if the Americans were giving some waivers to some countries, which really to allow them to trade with Iran, it could be seen as a de-escalation measure. It's provisional, it's partial, but it could be a positive signal coming from the American side. But again, the basic point is first, on the American side, a clear vision of what is a diplomatic path, because it entails, a sort of mutual moves towards de-escalation. The Americans can send a signal, and we have to wait for the Iranians, of course, to reciprocate, but we have to start.
It's really interesting that you say that because, you've said, well, the foreign minister says waging they say economic terrorism. And the U.S. is believed to want, as part of its strategy, to squeeze Iran dry when it comes to exporting oil. And this is what the Iranian ambassador to the UK told me about, he said the U.S. and its allies in the region are trying to do.
You know that there are countries in the region and beyond the region who have invested heavily billions of dollars to trap the United States into a conflict with Iran, a military conflict with Iran. They are, in fact, very determined not to allow this project would be a futile project, because they feel that maybe President Trump is not determined to go as much as necessary. Maybe he doesn't want to go into a war.
So you see what they're trying to do. They believe that President Trump is being pulled into this by his, as you said, hardliners on both sides. So hardliners in the U.S. And you just heard from the Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. How do you read that? Do you think there is that coalition trying to provoke a war for whatever reason?
Yesterday I was talking with the Iranian permanent representative to the United Nations, and he told me, the 12 demands, American demands I was referring to, is considered in Tehran as regime change. So you have also on the Iranian side this concern, and we, in a sense, the Americans have also to dispel it. And I am back to what I have said. The Americans have to offer a diplomatic offer. We are going to negotiate, because without a negotiation and with only these 12 demands as a sort of ultimatum, on the Iranian side, you're obliged to consider that actually the ultimate goal of the Americans is not a negotiation, but is regime change in Iran.
Ambassador, thank you so much indeed for joining us. And indeed, there are mixed messages, because the president says he wants to negotiate and others are saying things that are much more hardline. Thank you so much. And now it must be time for a musical interlude.
Workers making $5 an hour or less, that has a...
This today and solve it. But right now she'd rather shift the blame because she likes the partisan fight.
So, Speaker...
Best
Saying had weapons of mass destruction.
Are you saying, Senator, that you think the White House is not being truthful either about the attacks on the tankers previously or where this thing was shot down? Are you suggesting that we're not getting the right information from the U.S. intelligence services?
In terms of the tankers, as you know, there are differences of opinion. as best I understand, the owner of the Japanese tanker said that it was not a mine, but it was a object that flew through the air. In terms of this incident of the shooting down of the drone, there is a dispute as to whether it was in international territory or in Iranian territory. But even assuming that it was in international territory, even assuming that what Iran did is wrong, and they do a lot of things that are provocative and wrong. I'm not a great friend of Iran. Having said that, our job is to do everything that we can to bring about a diplomatic solution. Let us not kid ourselves. We have a president here, Donald Trump, who has allied himself with a brutal dictator in Saudi Arabia, who has been at war with Iran in every single way imaginable, who has led us into a war in Yemen, which has caused just horrific damage to that very poor country. So all that I'm saying is, let us do everything that we can to see that this crisis does not escalate, that it is settled in a diplomatic way. It is very easy for politicians to pound the table and talk about how tough they are, especially in an election year. But it will not be the sons and daughters of billionaires who get killed in those wars. It will be the working class kids of this country. So we have a responsibility to do everything we can to solve this crisis diplomatically, not go to war.
Senator, you have joined Cory Booker in the last 24 hours, calling on Joe Biden to apologize for comments he made about working with segregationists. And it's the more people would hear about it, some are saying, well, he was applauding or celebrating that. That wasn't what Joe Biden was doing. Joe Biden was trying to make the point that bipartisanship is necessary. He's done so working with the deplorable of the deplorables. That's why he gave the example of the segregationists. So why is it that you believe he has to apologize?
Look, I think the media makes a bigger deal of it than it is.
So he doesn't have to apologize?
All that I say, no, yeah, I do. Because it's one thing, look, when you're in Congress, you work with everybody. I do. I think every member of the Senate, every member of the House works with people who have very, very different points of view. But I don't think you have to be touting personal relations with people who were very brutal segregationists.
But
who did
Senator,
a massive amount of...
He wasn't touting
that's
relations.
my view on it.
His point
I'm
was...
sorry. Okay, ma'am, I'm sorry. If you disagree with me, that's fine. That's my view.
But haven't you, over a 4-decade career, had to align yourselves with people who don't share your views on things in order to advance your causes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just what I said. Absolutely. I have, and so has every other member of the Congress. But one doesn't really tout, one's personal relationships or make a virtue out of civility when it may be a necessity and not a virtue.
Understood. Senator, thank you for joining us. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a presidential candidate in the 2020 election. Joining us now, another 2020 contender, the guy who wants to clean up the climate crisis, Washington Governor Jay Inslee. Governor, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Look, I think everybody understands we've talked about this a few times, about the seriousness of the climate crisis. But I guess the question that Stephanie and I have got is, what do you say to people who think that it's the third or fourth or fifth most important thing to them, but they are worried that their lives will change in a way that reduces their prosperity? Maybe they work in the fossil fuel industry. Maybe they fear that they will lose their jobs. What's the argument? In the long term, I think they can understand the argument. In the short term, what's your answer for people who may be losing their way of life if you become president?
Well, look, today, the fastest growing jobs in America are in the clean energy industry right now. Jobs in the clean energy industry are actually growing twice as fast as the rest of the United States economy. The fastest growing job today is solar installer. Number 2 is wind turbine technician. Maybe 3 or 4 are carpenters and laborers that are rebuilding our buildings. Look, these are the jobs that are going to power the new economy. And we're all about building a clean energy economy. Donald Trump wants to chase the phantoms of the past. And yesterday, when he said we can just go back to coal, is really a lie to the American people. So I'm all about jobs. We're building the best economy in the United States and Washington. I want to do that for America.
Mike Bloomberg has launched the Beyond Carbon campaign, $500 million to shut down the coal industry, but also go to those coal communities and give back. Here's what doesn't make sense. They don't want him to. West Virginia, even Democrats like Joe Manchin have said, we don't want this in our state. So are the clean energy jobs not where those people are located? Climate change isn't a primary issue for them if they need to pay their rent next month.
Well, look, there's certain facts that we know. You can negotiate with Republicans, you can negotiate sometimes with your spouse.
I'm talking about the people in West Virginia losing their jobs.
Yes, and with those folks need to understand there is going to be a transition, and that transition is happening today. 2/3 of the coal plants have already closed in the United States in the last 10 years. And the reason is that renewable energy sources are becoming cheaper than coal, more available than coal. This is a transition that's taking place in any event. We need to be honest. These are dedicated, hardworking people. They and their ancestors built the United States economy, helped us win 2 world wars. And they need to have the support of what I call a generational investment, a second GI Bill, to assist those communities, like we're doing in my state. So in my state, we're closing our last coal-fired plant. We're not ignoring those communities. We have a $55 million fund to help them through this transition. That's what we need to do across the United States, because that is a reality. Today, we need to help these families.
Governor, for people who, look, these climate plans are sophisticated and complicated for good reason, because it's a sophisticated and complicated problem. Your climate agenda, the 100% clean energy plan, is different from the Green New Deal. What's the best way that you explain that to people?
Well, I think it's consistent entirely with the Green New Deal, which I'm really excited about. It has raised the profile of this issue. I love the fact that young people are driving this idea of a Green New Deal, and now we need policies to actually effectuate it. So I have a proposal and an experience that's very unique in the field of candidates. One is the only plan that will actually eliminate our use of coal-based electricity in 10 years. It is the only plan that will eliminate our use of fossil fuels in our grid in 15 and give us clean cars starting 10 years from now. It is unique, but I just got to tell you, the most unique thing about my candidacy is this. I am the candidate who will make this pledge. If I am elected, I will make defeating the climate crisis the #1 job of the United States. I will make it the organizing principle to mobilize the United States economy around this issue.
But what if
And
you
only
find out
with
on the
that commitment
campaign
will make it
trail
happen.
that that's not
I'm
the
sorry?
number? What if you find out on the campaign trail that that's not the #1 or 2 issue for voters, and you want to be the
It
next
currently
president?
is not. Even amongst Democrats, it's the #4 issue.
Well, actually, in Ohio, it's #1. In Nevada and New Hampshire, it's #1. And it's because people understand this is all of the issues. It's a national security issue with mass migration. It's a healthcare issue in New Hampshire where Lyme disease is now appearing. It's an economic growth issue with jobs. That type of message is working. We've had a recent surge in support. By the way, anyone who wants to can go to jansley.com and help make sure we get on the next stage of the debate. That is a surge we're seeing because people understand the importance of this issue.
I'm going to ask you, because this is the topic that we're asking candidates about, your reaction to the ongoing fallout with Vice President Biden and some of your fellow contenders about the comments he made about how he succeeded in having conversations with people who he thought were disagreeable. What do you make of those comments and the response to it?
Oh, I think it was a huge mistake by the Vice President. If he wants to talk about bipartisanship, sitting down and having tea with segregationists is hardly the way to demonstrate that. But I'm more concerned, frankly, about some of the views of the Vice President that somehow having tea with Mitch McConnell is going to help us solve these problems. Look, this was a fellow who tried to destroy the Obama administration every single day for 8 years. We need to make sure we defeat the climate crisis. This is a moral obligation.
But here's
and we
the
have
thing.
to take away the filibuster from Mitch McConnell.
So the answer is only, it's got to be only Democrats or only Republicans, because if Mitch McConnell is in the job he's in for a while, don't you have to play ball?
No, we need to have we got to elect more Democrats. We'd love to have a few Republicans help us on climate change. But we need to take away the filibuster, because the filibuster prevents the fruition of bipartisanship. We could have 10 Republicans voting with us to try to stop climate change, and he could use the filibuster, or 5 or 6 anyway, to prevent us from moving forward. So I would love to see a bipartisan effort, but as long as Mitch McConnell is wedded to the fossil fuel industry We are not going to be able to move this country forward unless we get rid of the filibuster. I'm the first candidate to say that. We have to defeat the climate crisis. This is our last chance. We cannot give power to Donald Trump, who says wind turbines cause cancer. We know they cause jobs. We're going to get that job done.
Senator, Governor, good to see you. Thank you for joining us again.
bet.
Governor Jay Inslee of Washington, the 2010 Democratic candidate. Well, why stop there? Why not just keep talking to candidates?
All right,
We have our own little debate. We don't have to wait till next
presidential
week.
candidates here on Velshi and Rule.
Alas, we have another presidential candidate with us.
Marianne Williamson joins us to defend some of her recent comments.
You teach yourself. And, when I do this masterclass that I just than ever before with steel.
Authenticity is the most important characteristic that candidates have to convey to the American people. And Joe Biden is authentic. He has lived his life. He considers certain things a resource that he has worked across the aisle. That's what he was saying. That's not what this election is about. This election is about how we connect with the American people, addressing their kitchen table needs.
Look, Jeannie, if you look back and you see what needed to happen in the civil rights era and previous to 1973, as you gave that example with your college students, I mean, people were meeting all the time, all sorts of things. So should he apologize for having been, as Nancy Pelosi said, authentic?
I don't think he should apologize right now. I do think him asking for Cory Booker to apologize was a bridge too far in my mind. I don't think he needs to apologize, but I do think...
Why are they all apologizing anyway? I mean, these people want to lead the free world as the president of the United States, so they say. Why are they so apologetic?
If you're going to make an argument in 2019 to be president in 2020, you don't hearken back to 1973. He's got to be more forward-looking. That's the problem with Joe Biden, these gaffes. He's trying to run a general election campaign in a primary for the Democratic Party.
So, Jeannie, I would have to say this, though, about your candidate potentially on the Democratic side. If you are having gaffes at this point and you've been skipping recent big Democratic events and you're headed into a debate, what is that going to look like?
The Trump campaign hopes they keep apologizing for things, because the more they apologize, the more likely it is that he gets reelected next year.
Wow, that is succinct.
It's a fact.
And so, regardless of all the impeachment threat and all of that, this could sink the battleship, so to speak, the political battleship.
They're on the defensive. The art of politics, some people say, is 85 miles an hour. You just stay fast and furious straight ahead and don't let things stick to you. The more you apologize, the more bad things stick to you. Stay focused on what you're talking about. Nancy Pelosi's right.
Let's be clear, though. Donald Trump wants to run against Joe Biden, and he's going to have a harder time if this becomes a Pete Buttigieg or somebody else. And so I don't think necessarily getting Joe Biden out
Pete Buttigieg is having his own problems with what's going on in South Bend, Indiana, and the African-American population there. We'll get into that on another day. Jeannie, Zach, come back soon. Good to see you both. Thank you. The Pentagon just released new video of Iran blowing up an American military drone out of the sky. President Trump reacting as questions loom about how the United States will respond. Up next, I'll talk with a man who knows something about Army Special Ops and is the author of Drone Warrior.
From the looks of things, this is just my personal point of view. And I realize sometimes whenever I put out some of my statements to my viewers, a lot of times I'm not politically correct pertaining to the Iranians actually being the ones that that blowed a multi-million-dollar drone out of the sky for no reason, versus the Arabs, or people may get offensive. I've actually heard the Middle Easterners called camel jockeys. I don't want to go so far as calling them camel jockeys, but the fact of the matter is you do have about 60 different ethnic groups over there that's all concentrated into one area. And whenever I call them the Arab Spring or the Arab community, I'm basically putting them all into one sack and shaking them up and dropping them out. And as I'm dropping them out, they're all dropping out the same. And the reason why I say that they're all dropping out the same is because the majority of the people over there hate anybody that is a supporter or a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And it really irritates me to see how that the Iranians is provoking the Americans, because they know eventually we're going to retaliate. The more that they continue to do damage to tankers or do damage to American property, we're going to retaliate, and in our retaliation, they will not like what the Americans is capable of doing over there, because it's no longer going to be this type of strategy that was going on during, I repeat, during the Bush administration towards fire when fired upon. That strategy is what has costed the American people over $5 trillion, and God only knows that the lives and the eyes and the arms and the legs and everything else that it has costed the American government by going in with this type of tactic that I don't know who conjured that up, but whoever it was obviously was not an ally of the American people. But as you can sit and see, pertaining to the political race, regardless whether it be the Republicans or the Democrats, one hand don't know what the other hand is doing. I agree to a certain extent about the environment changes, and that is going to be our next horizon to go over, or our next arches to go through towards succeeding in a society that obviously is falling apart right now, regardless whether it be our environment or our oceans, our seas that are warming up. And you can see this in the extreme weather events that's occurring on a day-to-day level. I agree with the guy in Seattle, the governor, that we need to pay more attention to that. But I also agree that there's a problem festering right now over in the Middle East that could actually be catastrophic to the world. So let's back this up and let's look at this real quick, and let's try to pay more attention to this, because I want my viewers to get a full scope
coverage now.
of what's
President
going
Trump
on.
saying you'll find out when asked if the United States will respond to Iran shooting down an American military drone in international airspace and waters. The Pentagon has released new video of Iran's latest act of aggression in that region. I want to bring in Brett Velosevich, former U.S. Army Special Ops and author of Drone Warrior. He's also a strategic advisor at White Fox Defense, a drone airspace security company. You are just the guy to talk to about this. So I've been,
Harris.
Good afternoon, learning along with our viewers about the Global Hawk drone and what it would take to bring it down. It was a surface-to-air missile. Talk to me about what this drone can do and what it would take to bring it down in terms of power.
Absolutely. So this is an RQ-4 drone. It's made by Northrop Grumman. It flies at a very high altitude. I use this quite a bit during my service doing intelligence collection. And this type of drone flies at very high altitudes, okay, upwards of 30,000 to 60,000 feet in the air. And basically, it has the ability to capture large amounts of imagery at once. So what we do with that drone is we send it over a country or a particular airspace, and we will basically blanket the area, conduct snapshots of hundreds of different photographs. It can cover an area of up to 2,000 square miles of terrain at any given time, and it allows us to see what Iran's doing. But let me be the first to tell you, as someone who has experience with the RQ-4, there's still this confusion that we were operating in Iranian territory. I can tell you firsthand, we would absolutely not operate an RQ-4 drone in Iranian territory. One, because of the tensions are so high. There would be a direct order to the Air Force personnel to stay away from that. and two, because it's not a stealth drone. I mean, the fact is that any radar that a government has the capability of picking it up. Surface-to-air missiles can strike it. So it's not the type of drone that can't be shot down because it loiters and it orbits at very slow speeds.
Well, not only that, I mean, if it's got a wingspan bigger than a 737, you don't need radar to see it if it dips down below 30,000 feet, right? You can look up and see it, so that makes a lot of sense. So the Lieutenant General, Air Force Central Command, got the conversation started with breaking news just now. It's been about 2 hours ago. And they rolled out that audio of what all the details that he could share. We learned a lot from that. From what you know, is this the kind of thing that pulls us into a confrontation? Is this the kind of asset that you say, you know what, that's different?
Well, it's no doubt a very expensive asset. It's one of the most expensive in our arsenal, upwards of $100 million. But the truth is, Harris, that the Iranians have been at war with us for years, especially their hardliners. They've been covertly at war with us. They've killed American soldiers. I remember even the IRGC tried to kill me once in Baghdad in a building that I was living in, where they fired rockets into it, meant to take it down. And unfortunately, other Americans were not so lucky that day, but they are already covertly at war with us. Now, previously, they haven't been so overt about it, and that's why I think this represents such a serious degree of escalation that absolutely warrants a military response, or they're going to keep doing it. And what's next, a commercial airliner?
Oh gosh, don't even suggest it. And that building incident that you're talking about, and from what you're saying, Americans did not survive it, and you say that's covert. What about those overt missions? 39 years of, you know, you heard General Keane talking about how they've hit a couple of our embassies over the years and we didn't respond in any way. They have fought us via proxy.
Exactly, and they continue to do that. I mean, Iran has its hands in a number of different locations around the world working with these proxy groups. They're hell-bent on conducting and striking and creating chaos in the region. They're going to continue to do that. I mean, for 39 years, we haven't really done anything about it, especially during the Obama era, where they were capturing our soldiers and they were basically, you know, parading them around for the world to see. And I don't think this president's going to continue to have that. We cannot let that happen on our watch. And I know that Pompeo basically said, look, if you kill an American, you will see an absolute response for us, and we will open up the gates of hell on you. I don't know if this rises to that level where we're going to see a major strike, but absolutely it should be measured and proportionate. We're talking about a $180 million drone in this case that, of course, wasn't manned, but at the same time, this seems like the Iranians have changed their calculus just a bit. It's almost like they want...
Did you hear what he just said? $180 million just fell from the sky. $180 million. What could we do with $180 million towards taking care of the elderly, feeding the homeless, and doing road work in, let's say, one particular county? What could $180 million do in one county, either in Tennessee, California, or wherever? What could that do? I'm going to tell you what it could do. It could be life-changing for a lot of people. $180 million. Because you could take that $180 million and engineer, ain't no telling what. Now, we are minus $180 million. This is really, really serious. And just like the gentleman just got through talking about, what's next? A commercial plane? Somebody with 250, 300 passengers in? Because don't underestimate your enemy towards thinking that these people ain't capable of doing stuff like this. They're itching for a war. There was a reason why the Pentagon was put on red alert and taking an armada of ships over there pertaining to our Navy and Air Force. There was a reason why that they done that, folks. We don't just pack up and go over to the other side of the pond for no reason. So there was a covert operation that was already in the works, and now we're starting to see the ramifications of it that could actually be astronomical to the world. Let's listen to the rest of this, and then I have to go.
To know they want to test us, they want to provoke some type of response, and I think at this point we're going to see something here soon.
All right. Brett Velosevich joining me today. Thank you very much. Drone Warrior is the book.
Thanks, Harris.
Appreciate your time. Caught on tape by her own camera.
Drone Warrior. We live in now a high-tech world to where we have expensive gizmos and gadgets out there that can be the eyes and ears of surveillancing our enemy, and now our enemy has tried to eliminate our capability towards identifying what they're up to. And what they're up to is the same thing that went out long about 1994 towards death to the Americans and death to Jerusalem, war to the Americans and war to Israel and Jerusalem. That concept has not changed. They're still wanting to take over the world. They're still wanting to dominate us with their ideology and their forceful way of thinking. And if people think that this is just some sort of idle play, they're thinking in the wrong direction, because whenever you have 3,000 people that dies in front of you immediately pertaining to 9/11, there's nothing idle. There's nothing playful about what these people are capable of. Nothing. Thank you to my viewers. Good luck to all of us. And hopefully, nuclear warfare will not become a art of play in these various perilous times that we're living in. Shalom.